Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about something a little different than FPV. If you follow my channel and you've been watching my videos, you know that I generally post flight footage of my adventures in FPV. I'm trying my hardest to become a better FPV pilot, and I enjoy sharing my travels with you. Today, I want to talk about something that's a little different. I want to talk about taking pictures of stars, which is astrophotography. It's another hobby that I'm into, and I thought it would be nice to maybe show you guys into that world a little bit. If it's never been something that you've looked into, I highly advise it. It's a lot of fun. It's something that I got into probably about 4 years ago. We went out with some friends to Colorado. It was our first time out west. It was magical. We had a great time. But one of the things that we did was at night we went out to see the stars, and I had my girlfriend's T3i. It was a Canon T3i, and we saw all these crazy stars just with our naked eye, and it was incredible. And I got out of the car, I put the camera facing up on the roof. I set the timer to as long as it would let me go. I think it was like 10 seconds or whatever, and took a bunch of pictures. And I ended up getting actually some decent sky pictures with the stars in them. And I was like, wow, this is really pretty awesome stuff, and I would like to get more of that. I started working with this guy who was really into photography. I ran to grab some of his prints one day. He had them in storage, and we were looking at them, and he had pictures of the Northern Lights, and I was knocked off my feet how awesome that was. There's so many factors, and the atmosphere at the time, and the weather, and the clarity, and everything, for all these things to line up for that magic to happen, and he just happened to catch it on a one-off shoot, which I thought was really cool, because that just shows you how special that moment was. So I'm just going to walk through my steps, what I like to do. I'm not the best at it. I'm not claiming to be the best at it. I'm just literally showing you what I got that night in particular and how I process it. So I'm going to show you how I developed this picture into this from this. This was a night sky that I shot in Sedona, Arizona, it's been a while, probably about 2 years ago. I was going through my pictures and came across this one that I hadn't developed yet. And this was taken on the driveway of the rental house that we stayed in. It was crazy because the whole town was pitch black. They don't allow streetlights in Sedona. So they take pollution very seriously. And yeah, let's start again. So today I want to talk about developing astrophotography. I consider myself kind of an amateur at it. I've only been doing it on and off for the past 2 years. It's something that I've always wanted to get into. It's something I've always been interested in, but I either didn't have the gear, didn't have the know-how, and didn't have the motivation to do it. And that kind of changed. I started working with a guy, just a little backstory. I started working with a guy that was really into photography, and he had me grab some of his prints from storage, and we were looking through them, and one of the pictures I saw was of the Northern Lights. And that resonated with me because it was just such a beautiful picture. It was taken out in the middle of the woods during winter, and they just happened to see the Northern Lights. They weren't even necessarily looking for them. They stumbled upon it, and he got this phenomenal picture. And that just kind of irked my interest in it, and it got me thinking that this is definitely something that I want to get into, or at least explore. So I started doing some research. I found a camera that I wanted. I got the camera. We worked together on finding me a lens. I found a great lens. And here we are. Boom. Got the picture. So this picture, as you could tell from the upper left corner, was taken with the ISO of 6400, 29 seconds. A few things about this picture. A lot of people that know what they're doing are probably looking at this and saying, hey, that's really grainy, or there's light streaks in it. I know it's not perfect. The reason for this is what I've learned is you don't need such a high ISO level necessarily. And also it depends on your lens size for the amount of exposure time that you can use. So for example, I think this is a 20 millimeter lens, so it's super wide. Everything was stopped to, my f-stop was as low as it goes. I was letting in as much light as possible. I forget the equation exactly. I'll put it up on the screen, but you can work out the maximum exposure time that's allowable before you start seeing streaks in the stars, which is what you see here, these little tiny lines. And I think the math works out to about 20 seconds is optimal for this lens size. So I'm about 9 seconds over, and that explains why, as you know, the Earth is moving and the light is gonna streak in that time. So if I had like a 14 millimeter lens or something even lower than that, I would be able to expose my time for longer without it showing star light streaks. So that's the few things that are happening in this picture just before we dig in. Also, I happened to get some tree in it and I got a little bit of roof in it, which is fine. So I'm just gonna go through the basic things. I mean, this, for me, it's not a science. I don't think you could just copy paste a bunch of settings in and expect it to look great. It's just not how it works. I like to start with, I just like to play around with everything a bit and just kind of see what my, range is for what I could get away with. Contrast is probably going to be your best friend because it just brings out the life of a picture. So as you increase contrast, but then you'll also get these sharp colored variations, which are interesting, but it does give it kind of a fake feel. It's a little too much for me. So I'm gonna play with that a little bit. So we bumped up exposure a teeny bit. We bumped up the contrast. Let's play with the highlights. So what does the highlights get us? It kind of brightens the space up a bit. Which I like. And now we're gonna play with the shadows. As you can tell from the shadows, it just kind of overall darkens the picture. So I'm gonna leave it. I'm actually gonna bump it up a bit. And the whites, you usually don't have to mess with the whites. I usually leave them as they are. I'm probably gonna leave it as they are. Same with the blacks. I don't like to really mess with this too much. That looks decent. And then I like to play with the presence a little bit with the clarity. So the more clarity that you introduce, the more noise you introduce. So I don't know if you could see that. That's me dropping it all the way down. And that's all the way up. So usually it's about 50%. I might soften that a little bit. I feel like it's just a little too much. What do you think? I think it's okay to drop it down a little. And then I like to drop down to, so sharpening. So if I drop, so the sharpening was default at 25. Let's bring it all the way up and see what that does. So you could see, if you look closely, you could see there's a lot of noise introduced. It just kind of exacerbates the problem. So I think it was defaulted at 16. I'm gonna put it at 10. And then also you could play around with the radius of that. And then noise reduction. Noise reduction is a big one for me. So I'll just show you when you apply that, it's going to take a minute. So when you introduce a lot of noise reduction, you actually introduce a lot of blurring. It seems that the machine is almost like duplicating pixels to achieve a smoothness. And overall, it just takes away the magic of the photo. And then no noise reduction has also the problem of it's almost too many stars. So I'm gonna bump this up to 15. Give it a sec to work. You'll see it change. Okay. I think that's looking better. Let's try this at 30. And I'm gonna undo it. Let's see the difference between 30 and 15. Okay, I think I'm gonna stick with the 15. It brings out a little more detail. And then we can also play with the contrast of the noise filter. And I'll show you. When you bump it to 100, it's gonna process that. So that's 100, and then I'm gonna bring it back down to 0. Really doesn't make a difference. Okay. Oh, so there's also this other tool that I really like, which is the dehaze. So if you drop this, it just totally wipes out the picture. But if you bump it up, you start to see these different colors, like this greenish, tannish hue. Right here, it's also super crunchy now. So the dehaze was sitting at 0. I'm gonna bring it up a little bit just because it brings out such a nice color. I'm gonna bring it up a smidge. And I'm gonna drop the sharpening a little and bring up the noise reduction and let that process. And now we can go back and look at the color. So vibrance, I'll show you from afar. So you bring vibrance from 0. As you increase it, the color becomes really artificial and gross. And if you bring it down, you lose everything. And same with saturation. It's very similar. I like to leave the saturation alone. I might bump the vibrance up a little bit, just to give it a little extra kick. I'll just show you again to compare. That's 0. That's 7. It's hardly noticeable, but I feel like it just adds a little extra color in there that I like. And then also look at the white balance. So I probably should have played with this first, but I'll just show you anyway. So as shot, so we're at 4166. As shot was 5250, which is a lot warmer. I'm probably going to bring it down a bit to something around that. I know that's a little more harsh coloring, but I think it's more pleasurable. I know that's a little more harsh coloring, but when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, I think it looks better. And it looks more natural. The blacks are more black. The Milky Way looks great. I might just tweak everything just a little bit just to see. Where we're at. Let's see the noise reduction. And the dehaze. There we go. I don't want to take it up too much because I really don't want to ruin the picture. So that's how you get to this picture. So if you've stuck around this long, I hope that was enjoyable for you and helpful. I'm going to post a few of the tools that I use down below in the description. These are weather checking apps. These are the dark sky finder, where you can find a dark place near you. It is a satellite system that maps out where the light pollution is in the world, so you can use it pretty much anywhere. So you can find out where the darkest places are. You can go out and shoot just like me. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a like, please subscribe, there's more to come. If you want to see more of this kind of stuff, please leave a comment. If you have questions, also please leave a comment. I'll do my best to answer them. And I appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in.